you and my thing with, in my place in the pseudo killers is astronomy and the universe. And what I feel like what my purpose is to try to raise the awareness in the young in the younger, because I'm 50 years old, so it's like I have nieces, nephews, a grandson, a granddaughter. I want them. I want to be able to try to lead them down that path, the scientific path, especially like I say in astronomy, and answer, to try to get to answer or help build on this wealth of knowledge that we have. So it gets kind of, I don't want to say frustrating, but I don't know if I can portray it or relay the information in a, well, I'm gonna say I don't know how to simplify that information for those who don't have that ground level work, have that understanding. Because there are some things you have to know before you can try to understand what a black hole is. So you being a college professor, I don't know if you ever have to run across that, but do you have any kind of methods to portray this level of information to, I guess you can say, the layman? I don't want to, discredit anybody for where they are intellectually, because we all are still trying to learn. But it gets kind of tough, when people ask me what is a black hole, but then you don't understand what gravity is and, all these different, steps to get to that black hole. So is there anything, I know you deal with, much older people and that have a better understanding, because you can't get to your level without knowing some basic things, but it's trying to portray that, because like you explained about Cygnus X1, I've read about that and I got a good understanding about it, but it's relaying that information. It's just got me in a conundrum, but it's very interesting. And for me, I learned it because there was something in me wanting to know, what is this? What are these scientists talking about? And like I say, black holes and stars are just, oh my goodness, I can go on for days, just listening, learning, talking about, engaging about those objects. So how do you handle that when it comes down to really trying to get that understanding across? Because to me, that's just the most amazing stuff in science. Like I say, that's me. I'm an astronomy buff. But when it comes down to stars and black holes, and like with stars, how they're formed, how they function, the life cycle of the star, and then, some stars leads to black holes. So is there any kind of methods or that you use that could help me in this quest?
Oh boy. That's a phenomenally difficult question. I'll say that, it's one of the hardest things to do. And the fact that there exists so many books at so many levels, and, bluntly, I would say 70 to 80% of those books at all levels, from, complete layman guides right through to graduate level textbooks, 70 to 80% of them are kind of derivative and kind of, frankly, not all that great. Even at the college level, if I'm looking for a textbook for a class, like I'm actually teaching a course on general relativity this semester, and I went through about 7 textbooks thinking, does this work? No. Does this one work? No. Because in one way or another, they're all they don't do what I want them to do. To put that another way, one thing that I like to do to graduate students is say to them, okay, I'd like you to explain what a black hole is, or why the universe is expanding, or one of these sort of big mysterious ideas. But then I'll say to them, you cannot use any word or any jargon that a middle schooler or a high schooler doesn't know. And that usually just freezes them, because it's a very difficult thing to do. Perhaps more deeply, there are sort of two related issues. One is providing explanations that make sense to people, give them an understanding at the level they happen to be at, the amount of knowledge, the amount of work they've done. But I've found personally there's also the issue of giving people an explanation that's on a sort of, I don't want to say psychological level, because I don't really know the right word though. To a lot of people who haven't studied science to at least some level, what they are looking for when they ask questions is definite answers, clear explanations that give them a sort of a neat picture tied up in a bow. This is a complete explanation. It's a nice little package. You don't need to worry about anything else. It's easy. You can do it in a few minutes. With black holes, indeed the universe in general, anything in the universe, that just isn't possible. And so what people generally try to do is pick the level someone is at, come up with an explanation that gives them a sort of some sense of what's going on, but at the same time kind of leaves some questions open. Because another thing you said was very resonant with me, and that is that, like, for some people, they have that urge to know. They always have questions. They want to understand. They it's question after question after question. And realistically, those are the people for whom the explanations are going to have the most resonance. They're going to want to know more, no matter how much you explain to them. And I have not yet worked out how to do this, but my sort of goal when I'm teaching is to try and develop that tendency within people, to sort of try and develop the tendency to keep asking questions, to keep wanting to know more. Because those people, when they're confronted with an explanation they don't like or it doesn't make sense, they'll go out and look for another explanation. I tell the classes I teach, hey, look, I'm going to explain this one way because it's the way I tend to get it. You may like that, you may not. If you don't like that, there's these whole bunch of books out there, there's YouTube videos out there. If you don't like the way I explain it, don't stop with me. There's other resources that might resonate with you better. The other thing, Travis, you're asking an incredibly difficult question, and I'm trying to give you a better answer, and it's quite hard. The thing that I sort of also try to do is to try and connect things, at least to some extent, to things that people might be familiar with in their day-to-day lives. So, for example, let's take Cygnus X1. The idea with Cygnus X1 is, as I'm sure you know, that it gives off a lot of energy, because as things fall towards the black hole, they start off far away and they're not moving. And as they fall towards the black hole, they speed up and speed up and speed up and speed up until they're moving at incredible velocity. And if any of that velocity, which is, of course, kinetic energy, if any of that kinetic energy gets converted into radiant energy, light, in other words, then that light can radiate outwards and you'll see it. And this is, of course, how Cygnus X1 is thought to be a black hole, because the amount of energy that it's radiating from such a small space, there's no way you can do that unless matter, gas, dust, whatever it is is falling so deep into a gravitational potential that it speeds up enough that it's got enough kinetic energy that some of that kinetic energy can convert to radiant energy, and that's what you see. Thermonuclear fusion won't produce enough light. The only way to do it is if matter is falling towards and reaches or close to an event horizon. Now, that level explanation would not work for someone with a sort of, I don't know, middle high school background. But for, say, a graduate student, that level of explanation is probably too simplistic. I'd have to put a bit of math behind it, put a bit of more explanation behind it. But what I'll typically try to do is find a way to kind of connect a day-to-day physical experience with what's going on up in the sky. So with Cygnus X1, if someone in a sort of high school level asks me to talk about black holes and something related to that, I'll typically say, well, you know how in your day-to-day life, if you hold something like, if you go stand on the roof of your house and you hold like a football or something, when you're holding it, it's not moving. But if you drop it just before it hits the ground, it's moving pretty fast. And if you could summon or you could harness some of that energy of movement and turn it into light energy, you can radiate quite a lot of energy. And that's why Cygnus X1 shines. Now, that explanation isn't terribly great, but at the same time, it sort of connects to something that they can do in their day-to-day life, that something that they can experience in day-to-day life. And maybe it's just me, but when I was, and well, still am, when I'm learning about things, my kind of tendency is to think about something that happened to me as I was walking down the street or making coffee that morning or something like that. And if I can connect what I'm saying to those day-to-day experiences, even just by analogy, then I found that often helps to sort of get people interested. The last thing, I'll just say, like, I can't remember who it was, but when we were talking to the group as a whole a few months ago, someone was giving an example about basketball shoes and friction. And I thought that was a really nice way of doing it because it sort of connected to, most people have got sneakers or basketball shoes or some kind of athletic shoe, and they can connect that experience, the fact that they don't slip when they try running, to something out there in the universe. The last thing I try to do is I always try and sort of say, there's much more here. There's many more mysteries. There's many more questions. But here is a way to discover more. I try and say, well, there's things I can't talk about, things you don't know. But here is a path to finding out more about those things if you want to. If you wanted to learn more about, say, Cygnus X1, what you'd have to do is kind of read about this or look at that. Or if you wanted to know more about the Event Horizon Telescope, then here's some things we could talk about. I kind of try to say the doorways to further discovery are kind of in this direction. And if they want to walk in that direction, great. But I try and at least give them a little bit of a map when I can. But I mean, I will say that the topic you're asking is the topic that, like, literally every college professor I know bangs their head against a wall about to some extent, because it's really hard. Like, if you want to test how good an educator someone is or how good an outreach person someone is, ask them something like, okay, could you give me an explanation of what a black hole is at primary school, middle school, high school, undergrad, grad, frontline research? Anyone who can give 6 different explanations of a black hole at those 6 levels and make it kind of resonate with the audience at those 6 levels is the greatest educator I know. And I'll just say up front, I can't do that, and not many people I know can do that. But that's kind of like the ultimate goal of being able to talk about these things. I'm sorry, I'm kind of starting to ramble a bit, but you got me on something that I find quite frustrating because I can't do it very well. And I'm always trying to work out a way to do it. And I haven't yet worked out how.
Oh, well, I totally understand. I mean, it's like I say, that's where I am. And I mean, what you said, I'm feeling it because I did a presentation on the show a while back, just on stars in general. And when I got to the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, where it shows the different types of stars and the temperatures that, relate with the size and or the mass of the stars, I try to equate that to like, the colors and the temperatures, it's how it's portrayed on the chart. So I try to use like a propane cooking element or a gas stove, whereas when you want to cook something, if you really want to get it hot, you turn the knob all the way up and the flame turns blue, or the tips of the flames are blue, but at the bottom of it, you see red, you see the different colors. And we know that, the red giants, they're big, but they're not as, the temperature is not as high as take for instance, a O-type star, which is blue. So I kind of, try to relate those two together to give them an understanding of the temperature, and then what makes the temperature what it is the mass of the star. So I guess that kind of on the same keel as trying to relate it to something in the real world to give an understanding of what's going on with the stars. So I guess I'm I'm where you are, just on a much lower level, because you're a professional in the field. I'm just an enthusiast. But like I said, it's something within me that wants to know and understand this. So I guess that's, like you said, it's frustrating to you, so that makes me feel better because it's very frustrating to me. But, just trying to relate these things to everyday situations, I guess that is the best. That would, coming from my perspective, would be the best way. Because like I said, I'm an enthusiast. I keep up with this stuff, but I'm not out there actually doing the work, such as yourself. So I appreciate that response. But
I actually like your. Sorry, I was just going to say, I really like your propane gas analogy for a sort of like layman audience. That's for using that to say, here's why different colored stars are different temperatures. I actually really like that one. I might borrow that one if I ever give a public talk.
Hey, well, be my guest. It'll be an honor, But that was the